Now it's time for another Board Game Brawl preview with Nick Minahan, sponsored by BoardGameBliss.com.
Hey now, my name is Nick, this is Board Game Brawl, and today we're going to be taking a look at a game that is currently seeking funding on Kickstarter. That game is called Have a Cow, and it's from Natural 20 Games. Now, if you like what you see throughout the rest of this video, I would encourage you to go to the Kickstarter page, which I'm going to have a link to at the bottom of your screen, and down in the description section of this video. I'll have that a couple more times throughout the video as well. That will take you to the official page. You can find out even more information about Have a Cow, and hopefully consider backing the project. Now, Have a Cow is a light family-style card game where each player is a dairy farmer. And what do dairy farmers need? They need cows. You're going to have a pasture with hay that attracts cows to it. You're going to try to have as many cows as you can. The first person to get to 4 cows, or 3 or 5, depending on the length of the game that you want, is going to be the winner. But of course, it's not quite that simple. There's some hand management involved because there are different cards that you may play, or that might be put into your barn that you're forced to play, that are going to affect the game as you move forward. Let's go ahead and take a brief look at how the game is played and some of the different cards. Then we're going to come back and I'll let you know what I think. Okay, this is your typical setup for Have a Cow. This is a competitive game for 2 to 4 players. Your goal is to get 4 cows into your pasture. So every player is going to have a barn card that they're going to set up above their pasture. Their pasture is just going to be the area where you're going to be placing cows, and that's also where you're going to be placing hay. Hay is important because you need hay in order to actually have cows. You'll also have a deck of the Have a Cow cards, the rest of the type of action cards. You'll shuffle those up. You're going to deal 5 out to each player, and then you'll put the rest of the deck in an easy place with a space for a discard pile. You'll keep the rest of the hay cards off to the side, and then you'll also have a player aid card as well. Now, at the start of the game, like I said, you're going to make sure that you have 5 cards, but at the start of every round, you could also have to make sure that you have 5 cards in hand as well, but you can decide to discard 2 cards before you draw back up. So if you have cards from the previous round that you held on to that you no longer want anymore, you can get rid of those in order to draw back up to 5. Then, and remember, this is happening on each player's turn in clockwise order, you're going to fill everyone's barn. You're going to take a card from the top of the draw deck and flip it face up so that it is with your barn. And this means that this barn card is going to be played at the end of the turn. We're actually going to get back to that later. Next, you have an opportunity to actually play the cards from your hand of 5 cards that you already have. Now, these are the same types of cards that are coming from the draw deck, remember, so they're the same type of cards that might be in your barn as well. Let me give you some examples of what you might find. First and foremost, you have your victory condition card, the cows. Now, anytime that you see a little hay bale underneath the name of the card, that is specifically an animal card. Some cards that depict animals aren't necessarily considered animal cards, but any of them that are going to go into the pasture whether you like it or not, and sometimes you don't want to. Now, the cow here, it says, when played, you must place this cow in a free hay in your pasture. If you have no free hay, place this cow in your barn instead. And that's why it is important to have hay, because cow needs to eat hay. Every 1 bale of hay is enough for 1 cow. And like this one says, if you cannot do that, then you're going to have to put it into your barn. And you might say, well, how are you going to get more hay? Well, there are cards like Sunshine, which says you can discard Sunshine in order to gain a hay. Now, you have the hay stack, but the hay stack says if it's in your barn during the play barn card step of my turn, which is the last step of the turn I haven't gotten to yet, you can discard it to gain 1 hay. Now, if that's not good enough for you, if you're stuck with that in your hand, you can play a farmhand, which lets you either draw 2 cards from the draw deck and then discard the farmhand to the discard pile, or you can discard the farmhand simply together with the hay stack just to get 1 hay. You have cards like the Barnyard Dog, which lets you discard an animal that is in your barn or in your pasture. That's because you might get stuck with cards like the Fweewita Pigs here, which are animals taking up your valuable hay and pasture space, but that aren't actually going to win you the game. So they may be cute, but you might want to get rid of them, and that's what cards like the Barnyard Dog are for. Here's another example of those animals that are really just pests for this purposes of the game. You have the Flock of Sheep and the Nosy Chickens. You don't want to get stuck with these if you can avoid them, so you never play these from hand. You would just hope that they're not played from your barn. Then you have event cards like the Red Tractor, which lets you move a card. Each player moves a card from their barn into the barn of the player on their left and then goes into the discard pile. Kaboom! Thunder frightens the animals. Discard Kaboom, then each player must move one animal from their pasture into their barn if possible. Then some crazy cards like the UFO. All players must either lose a hay or discard a cow. The UFO then vanishes into the discard pile. And finally, of course, the Dragon. If the Dragon is ever discarded, shuffle him into the draw deck. When Dragon is played, every player loses the hay, and then Dragon is shuffled into the draw deck. So you'll have a chance to play cards like that during your turn. But assume whether you do or don't, you're going to get to step 5, which is playing all cards in all barns. So everyone's going to look at the card that was dealt into their barn or that was placed there from other cards that were played during turns or your turn or previous turns, and those cards must be played whether you like it or not. So if this was the Free Little Pigs and I had an available hay, then that's actually going to have to go there. And by the way, some of the hay cards can be flipped over to count as 2 or 3 hay. If the card gives you more hay, you just need to, since there's a limited amount of cards, you can flip them over and it will signify, it will count as another hay. And what you're trying to do, like I said, is you're trying to be the first player to get 4 cows into your pasture. If you can do that, then you're going to win the game. And you can adjust the game to be shorter or longer if you want to play to 3 cows or 5 cows. That's totally up to you. You are limited to the amount of hay bales. You can only have a total of 5 hay bales in your pasture, which means that, which doesn't necessarily mean you're going to win, because you might be chock full of these other animals that aren't going to get you victory, in which case you're going to have to deal with that as well. But that is a quick run through of Have a Cow. Let's go ahead and get to my final thoughts. Have a Cow is definitely a light family style game, and I think that the artwork and the theme are going to appeal to a wide variety of people. Of course, kids. I mean, kids are going to like the cartoonish art style, and every kid is interested about life on the farm and animals, and especially dairy farms. But also even adults who, everyone plays those kind of simulations on Facebook or on PC about owning and maintaining a farm, and with the cartoony graphics that are almost look video game inspired, you can definitely make that connection. But there just happens to be a clever card game attached to this theme that actually makes sense thematically. All the mechanics in the theme tied together, and so gamerly gamers may find something here to interest them as well. This idea of having to play cows out into your pasture, but that's not quite enough. You also need to have hay cards as well, so you need to figure out how am I going to get those out there, and how it's sometimes very easy to get hay, but sometimes not as easy. Sometimes you need to play the farm hands together with the haystacks in order to make that happen, and then be able to put cows out there. You also have to deal with the cards that are going to be put into your barn that you have to play whether you like it or not, and of course the cards coming at you from the other players. But you're playing cards as well, and that's where the hand management aspect comes in, and you decide how to play them, when to play them, decide when to dump them as well. An interesting part about the game is that, and I always like it when I see this in card games, is that you can actually dump cards from your hand at the beginning of your turn in order to make room for other cards. How do you decide to do that? Do you get rid of cows? Cows are your victory condition, but if you don't have hay out in your pasture, then what good are they? You need to be able to, hay can be hard to come by, cows not so much, so you need to make those kind of decisions during the game. It's still a very light game, but there is that just a bit of edge there for people who are interested in more strategic card games, for them to be interested in it as well. And I think that all these different things together, the artwork and the theme and the mechanics, are going to make this an incredibly accessible game for young people, for families, for family game nights, for just getting out together with friends and wanting to play a very casual card game that doesn't take up a ton of space. I think this will be a success for those groups of people. And if you agree with me, if you want to find out more about the game and consider backing it, you should go to the official Kickstarter project page. I'm going to have a link at the bottom of the screen and down in the description section of the video that will take you to the page, find out more information, and hopefully consider backing the project. That is Have a Cow from Natural 20 Games. My name is Nick, this has been Board Game Brawl, and I'm reminding you to get out there and game every day and in every way. Take care.
Thanks for watching. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Patreon. And make sure to check out our sponsor, Board Game Bliss, where you can find an amazing selection of games from around the world. BoardGameBliss.com. Thanks for your support.